So now Dr. Suad is going to speak with Marjorie Hill. Marjorie Hill is a value community organizer and educator, a recipient of the Big Heart Award in 2017, and she is also the co-founder and executive director of the Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative, Muslim ARC, a human rights education organization, and co-founding co-director of the National Black Muslim Coalition, COVID. So now we're going to have a conversation about Malcolm X and COVID-19. Yes?
Yes, thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Margari. Thank you for joining us.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having us. SAPLO is part of the coalition. It's just really beautiful to see, just to listen to the speakers and the performers embodying, our mission, of like healing, of remembering our legacy. So it's just deeply an honor to be here and to witness and just knowing that the revolutionary thought, this like the Black radical tradition, like you are all embodying that, and that's being transmitted to the next generation. So that's something like as I'm, getting older, like in my like middle age, like I'm just like, wow, like our young folks, like SAPLO, you are all making that happen. So, I mean, I just feel so like warmed up, and I also, as someone trained as a historian, I want to be able to capture all of those names and all of these stories so that we can preserve that, and that, my generation really works to lift that up, and that we transmit that work to the next generation.
No, definitely. And thank you, Marguerite. What people don't know this probably, but Marguerite, like whenever I have a question about something, I'm like, I don't know how to do this. How do you do that? What do you do this? Like I'm texting Marguerite, like, how do you do that? And she's always really wonderful and generous with her knowledge on how to do things. And so I really appreciate that. And the thing that you're presently a part of, right, when we're talking about today, Malcolm X's legacy and COVID-19, is you're part of co-coordinator of the National Black Muslim COVID Coalition. So why don't we start there? Can you just tell us what is the National Black Muslim COVID Coalition and why is it necessary now and in the future?
Yeah, well, we're now kind of really in the midst of this pandemic, and we don't know like how long it's going to last. But what we found was, like when things first started happening, even within the Black community, like there was a lot of misinformation. We didn't think we could get it, like we had a lot of questions. It was like when Idris Elba got, we're like, oh, you get the Rona, so, and then a couple weeks later, I mean, what we were going to do, what was going to happen with our masajid. And so we know that even though like Black Muslims, like we're like deeply rooted in our communities, we typically live in Black communities and really tied with our kinfolk. But at the same time, within the broader, like when people are thinking about responding to Muslims, a lot of times like they'll skip over their Black kinfolk that, follow the deen, and so, and then also like within Black spaces, it's a very Christocentric, like they're going to talk about distributing things through the church, like they're not going to always think about the particular needs of people who are not following the Christian tradition. So we had that erasure. And then we know like within Muslim spaces, there tends to be the erasure of Black Muslim perspectives, like being power brokers, even though like we're in, like whether in office, even, you have Muslim adjacent people in office, right? Like, I mean, Obama, Barack Hussein Obama was very Muslim adjacent.
Right.
That's what they accused him of. But still, like when people think about political power and Muslims, they'll skip over Black Muslims, right? And subsume those issues. So we found like, even though there's such good work that was happening locally, even regionally within umbrella organizations, we know that Black Muslims from the beginning have been about mutual aid, have been doing, we have Muslim doctors, we have all these things like best practices, but yet those weren't seen. Whether you looked like if you did a Google search, if you tried to find out what was happening, unless you knew directly those, those communities, right? And you knew where their Facebook was, or, you know, you could get onto their prayer line, you know, like those are things that were less accessible. And so what we wanted to do, like we asked around, was there a national Muslim response, like from Black Muslims? Was there anything happening nationally? And it was silent for us, like for a while. And so we went, asked a bunch of people, we didn't see anything. And then within a few days, like, cause it was Dr. Camilla Motman Rashad who reached out to me, and I was like, you know, with social isolation, you're going to have policies happening. You're going to have responses through like the COVID response and recovery. And what I do fear is even for like funding issues that Black Muslims would not be able to actualize their full, you know, and they would, Black Muslim leaders would also, you know, who are, you know, we're always dealing, we've been in crisis, right? We've been dealing with white supremacy on the extreme levels, like multiple levels. And so we wanted to find a way to lift up Black Muslim leaders by connecting Black Muslim leaders with each other. And so the framework that we had was, you know, and she's like, Dr. Cam is a psychologist. So her work is on healing justice. And my work is on anti-racism and systems change, but also the community organizing framework. And what I found was that we also had a digital divide where Black Muslims have not been involved in digital organizing so that we could find targets and move things. And so we kind of came together and like kind of tried to bring our best, you know, superpowers. Like she convenes people, she does great work in creating these spaces where people feel whole. And I'm looking like right now with Poppin and the BMCC thread, like there is like just pure Black joy as they're talking about food across the diaspora, as they're planning like Eid and lots of jokes, you know, through all of it, right? And so, you know, she's really good at like Black Muslim psychology is like a beautiful Black gathering, like period. And my strength has been, since we started Muslim Arc, we've been doing kind of digitally organizing a community of utilizing these tools to bring people together in digital spaces and to create curriculum and create interactive convenings. And so we brought that together for BMCC, and we have like about 40 volunteers divided in committees across disciplines, from imams and religious scholars, men and women, to mental health, physical health, so doctors, psychologists. So that's another area. We have like our organizing advocacy team. And so what our hope is to really bring through like kind of snowflake organizing, which is connecting leaders across the country and doing that kind of that work of network leaders, where we're not just looking at one person to save us, but looking at all, like each person could be a leader. You know, we're looking at the sisters on the line who's serving food during the iftar, like they are leaders. They are the people that are like the gatekeepers in community. And so how could we learn how they're doing things to make sure that our elders are being fed during this time, are distributing.
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I was sorry to interrupt you, but I was thinking about Malcolm and related to what you were talking about in questions of mutual aid, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and so I was thinking, and maybe you could expand a little bit on that in terms of the practical steps, right? The coalition is taking to sort of amplify that message, right? This idea of, like, we think about Malcolm, we think about resistance, we think about doing for self, right? And we think about doing things for ourselves and being in community. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about sort of that part of the work as well.
Yeah, I mean, when we first were looking at inspiration for what we wanted to do, I mean, that was our instant inspiration, was like about setting aside our differences. Because, you know, I mean, we're family, we love each other, but like as family, we fight hard, you know, like, you know, you have siblings, they sometimes have beef with each other. And we knew we had to set aside differences because we're trying to save lives. There are Black Muslims that have died, you know, like how do we make sure it's heartbreaking. And then we have to care for those that are left behind, for the, you know, for the widows, widowers, for the children, for the orphans, like all of that. So like through this whole time, like we have to think about how do we care for each other and set aside what Malcolm X talks about. He said our petty differences so that we could be free. Now, the reality, like we know, like these disparities, we have 2 times the amount of mortality. But in tied to that is even like the economic gains that would lead to like some semblance of Black autonomy. Those are being erased right now, right now. So it's like, what are we going to do? Well, what we need to do is like, you know, I'm looking at his, like I just spent a lot of time meditating on his message to the grassroots, where he's talking about the Bandung Conference, which is like one of my favorite historical moments of solidarity of like newly independent nations coming together and kind of looking at Europe as like, Europe's the problem, right? And there was like that high moment, right? But like, was inspired by Bandung, which was in 1955, and he talked about it in this, you know, in the message to the grassroots. And so, you know, this idea of like really challenging, like what are we really trying to do? How we're trying to build power, you know? And so like, are we trying to be accepted? Like, we're not just trying to survive, right? Or just, you know, we are trying to thrive. And so his like Malcolm's message, right? And the harsh criticism of how we've internalized white supremacy, it resonates right now. It resonates in us making sure that we call in like some of the whether it's the discourses that are blaming Black people for their death and suffering, but it's also, I think, like when thinking about that even with COVID, with social distancing, we must be enraged and ready for action when one of us is gunned down. Like that's just the reality. Like, when Black life is being threatened, we cannot just sit there and just be like, well, I'm just only thinking for myself. But we have the tools, and with what you were saying with Black autonomy, right? The do for self, we have everything that we need, but what we need is each other. And we hope that through trauma-informed community organizing, which is recognizing like, look, we have 400 years of trauma, you know, and those from the motherland, like similar, many years, colonialism, colonial trauma. And we have trauma as an African diaspora, and that, you know, and it leads to mistrust. And it leads to thinking sometimes on our narrow self-interest, where we may not always think about Black liberation, or we think about Black liberation as a zero-sum game, as opposed to like broader, you know, like what is the world that we're trying to create? And then some people are just trying to like, I'm just trying to get mine and have my side hustle, or it's like a either or, you know, like it's either, you know, like when we're trying to you know, trying to overcome things as Black people, that doesn't mean, you know, like it doesn't hurt other people, because we know Black liberation, like when we center with brother, like with the Jericho movement, that's going to help us all. Like it's not a zero-sum game. So, you know, like definitely the spirit of Malcolm of like doing, of organizing, and even Malcolm as an organizer. A lot of times we think about the spiritual aspect of Malcolm. We think about Malcolm's speech, but we don't think about how Malcolm organized in the Nation of Islam and beyond. And what does that mean? And how do we need to model that as we build our power?
Right. No, thank you. I mean, oh my God, there's never enough time. There's so much here. I think that trauma-informed organizing, I think that's going to stick with me, because I think, you know, when I think about this and COVID too, because even the conversation about us not getting it, right? In some ways, I think might also be a response to trauma, right? Because looking for these ways in which you're exceptional, right? And then of course, our reality is that we're twice as affected. I think I was listening to a news report today in New York, from New York City, where I'm from, and they were saying the rates of COVID, right, among Black people is twice the rates, right, among white New Yorkers, right? And we're going to have to end, but I wanted to give you opportunity just to tell us, you know, how can we get involved? Like, what do we need to do? What do you want folks to do, you know, so that we can sort of support this work? And like, what should we do? What's the call to action?
We got to organize. You know, he left that as a call, right? And ballot, or, you know, or the bullet, like we have to organize. And so right now we are building that infrastructure together, and we're going to get there together doing that. And so this isn't about one organization or another, but like what we will need to do in the next month is in collaboration. So all the organizers, and I'm going to be doing some reaching out, and our organizers, like we need to kind of have a collection of organizers so that we could do this, build on relationships and then, you know, connect across the country, and build our own political power, right? Our own power. And that means different things, but, you know, for different people, but like really, we have to really show that we can come together and say, these are things that we want during the COVID recovery. So I do invite everyone to come to blackmuslimcoalition.com. There's either 2 forms, and the volunteer form, it gives multiple levels. There's not just one. Like if you're just like, look, I'm spread thin, just join our advisory so that we can reach out. If you just like, if you got 5 hours a week and can make it to the Sunday meeting, join, because we can use you. Make sure you follow us on social media and help build out this vision, because we're right now, this is like a crisis unlike we've known in any of our time. And we're facing, you know, I mean, when we talk about charged genocide, like this is a pre-genocidal moment, and this is really serious, but it's also a beautiful moment where we have a special place as Black Muslims in this country to do some amazing things. So let's vision that together.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Margari. Thank you for the work that you're doing with Muslim ARC, what you're doing with the Black Muslim Coalition. I think we put the website up so people can go there and fill out and find ways to get involved. And so thank you again.